The story begins with a man named Daniel, a quiet and solitary individual who often visited an old forgotten cemetery on the outskirts of town. One day he noticed a grave so overgrown with weeds that it seemed lost to time. Touched by its neglect, Daniel decided to clean it up. He pulled away the vines, wiped the moss off the weathered headstone, and left a bouquet of fresh flowers. The grave bore no name, just the faint etching of a date decades old. Little did Daniel know, this small act of kindness would unravel a mystery far beyond his imagination. 3 days after leaving the flowers, Daniel received a call that would change his life forever. The voice on the other end identified itself as a representative from the Pentagon. At first, Daniel thought it was a prank, but the caller's tone was deadly serious. They asked him to confirm his identity and then posed a single chilling question. Why did you leave flowers on that grave? Daniel's heart raced as he struggled to answer. How did they know? And why did they care about an abandoned grave in the middle of nowhere? The Pentagon official, refusing to elaborate, over the phone instructed Daniel to pack a bag and await further instructions. Within hours, a black SUV arrived at his doorstep. 2 men in suits escorted him inside, their expressions unreadable. The drive was silent, the tension palpable. Daniel's mind swirled with questions, but he knew better than to speak. The SUV eventually stopped at a private airfield where a jet awaited. As he boarded, he realized this was no ordinary investigation. He was being taken to the heart of the U.S. military's most secretive institution. Upon landing in Washington, D.C., Daniel was whisked away to the Pentagon. The sheer scale of the building was overwhelming, but he had no time to take it in. He was led through a maze of corridors to a secure conference room. Inside, a group of high-ranking officials sat waiting. At the head of the table was General Carter, a stern-faced man with a reputation for ruthlessness. He gestured for Daniel to sit and then dropped a bombshell. The grave Daniel had tended belonged to a classified operative who had disappeared 30 years ago. General Carter explained that the operative, codenamed Ghost, had been part of a top-secret mission during the Cold War. Ghost had vanished without a trace, and the government had assumed he'd been killed or defected. The grave was a placeholder, a way to honor him without revealing his true identity. But now Daniel's flowers had triggered a series of events. The grave was supposed to remain untouched, a forgotten relic of the past. By disturbing it, Daniel had inadvertently activated a long-dormant protocol, one that signaled Ghost's possible survival. Daniel was stunned. How could flowers trigger such a response? The general revealed that the grave was rigged with sensors designed to detect any interaction. It was part of a failsafe, a way to alert the Pentagon if anyone ever came looking for Ghost. The sensors had lain dormant for decades until Daniel's act of kindness set them off. Now the military was scrambling to determine whether Ghost was alive, whether he'd left clues, or whether someone else was manipulating events from the shadows. The officials questioned Daniel relentlessly. Had he seen anyone else near the grave? Had he noticed anything unusual? Daniel shook his head, his mind reeling. He was just a man who'd wanted to honor the dead. But the more he spoke, the more he realized how deep this went. The general leaned in and asked the most terrifying question yet. Did you receive any messages? Any signs? Daniel's blood ran cold. He remembered something, a faint symbol scratched into the back of the headstone, one he'd assumed was just weathering. Daniel described the symbol, and the room erupted into chaos. The general immediately ordered a team to the cemetery to investigate. Daniel was placed under temporary lockdown, his every move monitored. As he sat in a guarded room, he pieced together the fragments of the story. Ghost hadn't just disappeared. He'd been part of something so dangerous that even decades later the Pentagon was terrified of its resurgence. And now, Daniel was tangled in the web, all because of a simple bouquet of flowers. Hours later, the team returned with grim news. The symbol Daniel had described was a coded message, one only Ghost would know. It was a distress signal, a call for extraction. But the message was old, faded by time. Had Ghost left it years ago, or was it Recent? The Pentagon had no way to tell. What they did know was that someone or something had prompted Daniel to find that grave. The general's eyes darkened as he considered the possibilities. Was this a trap, or was Ghost still out there waiting for help? Daniel was given a choice: walk away and never speak of this again, or join the investigation and help uncover the truth. Despite the danger, his curiosity won out. He agreed to assist, and the Pentagon began briefing him on Ghost's last known mission. It involved a Soviet-era weapon, one capable of unimaginable destruction. Ghost had been sent to dismantle it, but he'd vanished before completing his task. The weapon's whereabouts were unknown, and if it fell into the wrong hands, the consequences would be catastrophic. As Daniel delved deeper, he learned that Ghost wasn't just any operative. He was a legend, a man who'd operated in the shadows for years without ever being seen. His file was filled with redactions, his true name erased from history. The only clue was the grave, and now, the symbol. The Pentagon's top cryptographers worked around the clock to decode its meaning. Meanwhile, Daniel was sent to a safe house, his presence kept off the books. He was both a witness and a pawn in a game he didn't understand. Days passed with no breakthroughs. Then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a retired analyst named Miriam, who'd worked on Ghost's case decades ago. She recalled a rumor about a backup protocol, a way for Ghost to communicate if he was ever compromised. The symbol matched one from his personal cipher, a code so obscure only a handful of people knew it. Miriam's hands trembled as she explained. The message wasn't just a distress signal, it was a warning. The weapon was still active, and someone was looking for it. The Pentagon mobilized immediately. Teams were dispatched to suspected locations, but the trail was cold. Daniel, meanwhile, couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something. He returned to the cemetery, this time under heavy guard. As he stood before the grave, he noticed something he'd overlooked before, a small, almost imperceptible gap at the base of the headstone. Kneeling, he pressed his fingers against it, and to his shock, the stone shifted. Beneath it was a hidden compartment, containing a single weathered photograph. The photo showed a young man in military garb, Ghost, presumably, standing in front of a nondescript building. On the back was a set of coordinates. Daniel's heart pounded as he handed it to the agents. The coordinates led to a remote facility in Siberia, a place long abandoned but still under surveillance. The Pentagon's worst fears were confirmed. Ghost had been there, and so had the weapon. But what had happened next? Had he succeeded in destroying it, or had he been stopped? The answers lay in Siberia, and time was running out. The decision was made. A covert team would infiltrate the Siberian facility, with Daniel accompanying them as a consultant. He'd become an unlikely expert on Ghost, and his insights might prove invaluable. The flight was tense, the team preparing for every possible scenario. As they landed in a secluded area, Daniel felt the weight of the mission pressing down on him. He wasn't a soldier, but he was now part of something far bigger than himself. The facility loomed in the distance, its darkened windows like empty eyes watching their approach. The team moved silently, breaching the facility with precision. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. The walls were lined with faded Cyrillic signs, the remnants of a Soviet-era nightmare. As they advanced, they found evidence of Ghost's presence, a makeshift camp, old supplies, and more of his cryptic symbols. Then they discovered the heart of the facility, a chamber housing the weapon, or at least what was left of it. The device had been partially dismantled, but key components were missing. Ghost had been here, but he hadn't finished the job. The team searched for clues. Daniel noticed a journal tucked beneath a pile of debris. Its pages were brittle with age, but Ghost's handwriting was unmistakable. The entries detailed his mission, his discovery of the weapon, and his realization that he'd been betrayed. Someone within his own team had sabotaged him, leaving him stranded. Ghost had spent years trying to complete his mission alone, but the journal ended abruptly. The final entry was a single line. If found, tell them the key is in the flowers. Daniel's breath caught. The flowers, his flowers, had started this whole chain of events. The team radioed the Pentagon with their findings. The general's voice was strained as he ordered them to extract immediately. The missing components meant the weapon could still be operational, and if Ghost's betrayer was still out there, they'd be after it too. As they retreated, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. Just as they reached the exit, a shot rang out. One of the agents fell and chaos erupted. Figures emerged from the shadows, armed mercenaries, their faces obscured. The team fought back, but they were outnumbered. In the confusion, Daniel was separated from the others. He ran through the facility's labyrinthine halls, the sounds of gunfire echoing around him. He stumbled into a storage room, barricading the door behind him. As he caught his breath, he noticed something glinting in the dim light, a small metallic object hidden among the crates. It was one of the weapon's missing components, carefully concealed. Ghost must have hidden it here, knowing his enemies would never stop searching. Daniel pocketed it, knowing it could be the key to stopping catastrophe. The mercenaries were closing in. Daniel knew he couldn't stay hidden forever. He spotted a ventilation shaft and pried it open, squeezing inside just as the door burst open. Crawling through the tight space, he emerged outside, where the team's extraction helicopter was waiting. He sprinted toward it, bullets whizzing past him. At the last moment, he was pulled aboard, the helicopter lifting off as the mercenaries fired futilely from below. The team was battered but alive, and they had what they came for, the component and the truth about Ghost's mission. Back at the Pentagon, the mood was grim. The general confirmed their fears. The mercenaries were hired by a rogue faction, one that had been searching for the weapon for years. With the component Daniel had recovered, they could now ensure the weapon would never be used. But one question remained. What had happened to Ghost? The journal suggested he'd been alive, long after his disappearance, but there was no record of his fate. Daniel couldn't help but wonder if Ghost was still out there, waiting for someone to finish what he'd started. In the weeks that followed, Daniel was debriefed extensively. The Pentagon offered him a permanent position, citing his unique connection to the case. But Daniel declined. He'd seen enough of the shadows to last a lifetime. Instead, he requested one thing: to return to the abandoned grave. This time he left not just flowers, but a small plaque bearing Ghost's codename and the date of his last known entry. It was a tribute to a man who'd sacrificed everything, a man whose story might never fully be told. As Daniel stood there, he felt a strange sense of closure, but the story wasn't over. Months later, Daniel received an unmarked envelope in the mail. Inside was a photograph of a remote cabin, its door slightly ajar. On the back was a familiar symbol: Ghost's cipher. Daniel's hands shook as he realized what it meant. Ghost was alive, and he was reaching out. The photograph was an invitation, a call to meet in a place far from prying eyes. Daniel knew the risks, but he also knew he couldn't ignore it. The mystery had consumed him, and now he had a chance to see it through to the end. Daniel packed his bags and set out for the cabin, located deep in the Canadian wilderness. The journey was arduous, but he pressed on, driven by a need for answers. When he finally arrived, the cabin was silent, its interior shrouded in darkness. As he stepped inside, a figure emerged from the shadows. An older man, his face lined with years of hardship. Their eyes met, and in that moment Daniel knew this was Ghost. The man smiled faintly and spoke a single word: flowers. The story had come full circle. Ghost revealed everything: the betrayal, his years in hiding, and his desperate attempts to complete his mission. The weapon was finally destroyed, thanks to Daniel's actions, but Ghost could never return to his old life. He'd chosen exile over death, watching from afar as the world moved on. Now, with the truth uncovered, he could rest. Daniel stayed with him for days, listening to stories of a life lived in the shadows. When it was time to leave, Ghost handed him a final gift: a small encrypted drive containing all his secrets. "Use them wisely," he said. As Daniel walked away, he knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where the past and present would finally reconcile, and it had all started with a simple act of kindness: a bouquet of flowers on an abandoned grave.